The back of the first race of the day with the Renault Twingo Cup finishing just a minute ago. As you can see, I've just run to the grid to make it for the start. It is time to start with today's program of the Formula 4 Central European Zone. It's the second weekend of the season, again in Austria, here at the Salzburgring. The weather is very nice. It was raining overnight, so some of the patches of the track are still damp, so it's going to make things a little more exciting. But onto the grid, I'm standing right on the edge of the grid and of the first line on pole position. On your right-hand side, my left-hand side, is yesterday's race winner Elia Weiss, who scored victory in his group race, and this is the second race he's going to do in order for him to try and qualify for the weekend's finale at the end of the day. But alongside him, a driver that has not had a chance to race yet because he was in a group that was not racing yesterday, and that is last year's championship runner-up and also a title hopeful Max Karhan, teammate from Jenzer Motorsport. So you can see the same colors on his car. Dean Pedersen and Simon Rechenmacher sharing row number 2. But if we focus the camera a little bit further back to the predominantly orange car, that's Ella Häkkinen, of course, the daughter of the two-time Formula 1 world champion Mika Häkkinen, also racing with us, and this also being her first race of the weekend. Well, we just have a couple of minutes to start. Let's get ready, let's get excited for the Formula 4 race. I tell you what, I think you can tell, but it's a long walk. It's even a long jog from the front of the grid back to where our broadcasting van is parked. So, well, everything's cool. We are making it for the start of the first race of Formula 4 Central European Zone. This day, of course, the first race already happened yesterday for groups A and B, but this time it's B plus C. So you'll see some of the drivers that did not race yesterday. You'll see some names that were on the grid in the first race of the program. And we are still putting the results together like a jigsaw. So, as already mentioned, Elia Weiss, yesterday's race winner, this time on pole position. We do not have the championship leader David Walther together with us. He was in the group that has a break for now. But we have other fast drivers on the grid. Max Karhan, of course, on the other side of the front row in his Jenzer Motorsport machine. Behind them, Dean Pedersen and Simon Rechenmacher. And then it is Alexander Bogunovic in 5th and Ella Häkkinen in 6th. Francesco Piocopola, Antonio Errigo, Matilda Paz and Mio Ollert to complete the top 10 on the grid. Everybody is back in their positions. The green flag is now in the air, so the red lights are now coming on. And we are underway at Salzburgring here in Austria for the Sunday morning, and Elia Weiss immediately slotting ahead of Max Karhan on the run down to the first chicane to defend his leading position. Also watch out for Dean Pedersen from 3rd. Now the first two drivers safely through, hopping over the curbs in the first chicane. It's very tight, I can tell you that, but there's plenty of runoff area if you actually need to take evasive action onto the turns number 3 and 4, these quick undulations and first helix of the day, as we are now running through the very crucial turn number 5, where you need an absolutely perfect exit to get a proper slipstream and proper speed, then back up the back straight. And I also see the McLaren colors way further down the field. Ella Häkkinen did not manage a good start, but there is a change in the lead. Max Karhan trying to take fight with Elia Weiss. It's extremely close between them. Still some of the parts of the track slightly damp, and they are fighting one another. Max Karhan being very brave indeed on the Sunday morning. Not the same way that I was, I need to tell you that. But Max Karhan takes the first place for himself. That was a very brave move around the outside of the fearsome turn number 11. So it is now the Czech driver leading proceedings at the end of lap number 1 here at Salzburgring. Elia Weiss immediately coming under more pressure, this time from Dean Pedersen in the fight for second for now. It's actually already Alexander Bogunovic. I beg your pardon. Alexander Bogunovic, the Slovenian driver, actually making a very good getaway and the opening lap of the race, but he does not manage a very good jump through the first chicane, so coming under pressure from Simon Rechenmacher, however being a little better through the turn number 5, but on the exit it's a different story again, and Rechenmacher piling the pressure on Bogunovic. The first two Jenzer cars trying to disappear into the distance. Ella Häkkinen actually dropped 10 places at the start, and she is now down in 16th. So along the back straight we go again with Simon Rechenmacher down the inside, holding on the other drivers, trying to rob him of 3rd. That's Bogunovic. That would also be Dean Pedersen and Francesco Piocopola. So through the final S's we go, back onto the start and finish straight again. The first two Jenzer Motorsport cars are now pulling a bit more of a gap in the race lead. Karhan leading Elia Weiss, and then you see there is already a second between second and third placed man. Simon Rechenmacher will try to get back in touch with the leading pair. The Jenzer cars really jumping across the curbs. They are very high, and honestly in touring cars you really need to take full width of them and jump across to really make a straightest line possible through that chicane so that you don't lose speed on the exit, especially I can tell you that on a Renault Twingo, which does not really have very many horses under the bonnet. So every kph that you lose will cost you on every meter that follows. The Formula 4 cars a lot more powerful and also slightly lighter, around about 175 horsepower in these machines. Max Karhan now under pressure from his teammate, but choosing the inside line. And would you just look at that? I mean, I have not yet seen a successful overtake around the outside, and this is the first one. And hats off to Elia Weiss, because what a move that was. He was already fantastic and spectacular yesterday, and that was one heck of a move now on Max Karhan. Hats off to Elia Weiss. We've got one of the cars in the pits. If I was right, that was car number 19, Patrik Lipovic from the OK Motorsport. Fights in the first chicane. All drivers in the end managing to squeeze in, but of course that creating a chain reaction. Simon Rechenmacher manages to pull away from the rest of the pack and actually get closer to the Jenzer cars. So that was a very key move, I would say, for him, as he is now back in the fight for the race victory. There he is, together with the Jenzer cars, and it is again Max Karhan finding slipstream and finding way past his teammate. And Max Karhan coming back on top yet again. So the lead changes again. Max Karhan back in first from Elia Weiss and Simon Rechenmacher. So let's see what they can do. Max Karhan now a lot more careful, breaking into 12, watching his rearview mirrors, choosing the middle lane through there, just to see what the other two drivers are after. And Max has now served his teammate to Simon Rechenmacher's hands, so he will leave them to fight for second, and he will try to make a little escape. But honestly, at this track, it's pretty much impossible to drive alone. If you are at least in a pair, it's much faster, because the slipstream up the back straight is just so powerful. Ella Häkkinen also making moves. She moved from 16th to 13th for the moment, and I could again see the orange highlighted McLaren liveried car making moves. Now probably even moving up to 12. And this would be Dean Pedersen and Francesco Pioccopola fighting for fourth. Behind them it is Aleksandar Bogunovic. Bogunovic, he was very good on the opening lap of the race, moved himself up to third, but since then losing ground. Behind him, the Italian Antonio Arrigo, then Jorge Luis Bruno and Matilda Paz in ninth from Peyton Westcott. Her, I would say, female colleague from the F1 Academy, both ladies joining the Central European Formula 4 Championship for the weekend. Both of them raced in Montreal just last weekend. And there is Ella Häkkinen also joining them for this weekend. She was not part of the Montreal weekend, although she is getting ready for her campaign in F1 Academy next season in the McLaren livery. Further fights up the grid. Pioccopola making a move around the outside. Ooh, squeezing Pedersen onto the inside part of the track. But Pedersen somehow still finding enough space for himself, still leaving that foot in the door. But now for the S's, it doesn't work anymore. And Pioccopola moving himself up to fourth. It was a brave move, but quite honestly, here at the Salzburgring, you can't pretty much do anything but brave moves. Now also Ella Häkkinen coming under pressure, but further ahead we have got Pioccopola. squeezing Pedersen, and Pedersen will not make the chicane. He has to go through the gravel trap and back onto the track. He will lose more places, and he will definitely be unhappy about what just happened, because he would argue that Pioccopola simply squeezed him onto the grass. There was, I would say, barely, but still enough space. I understand the stress of the situation, but it might be very on the edge, but I would still go with the fact that it was nothing unsporty from Pioccopola. But at the end of the day, this is for the stewards to decide. Luckily not for me. And another wonderful fight. This time it is car number 8, Andreas Lebu, finding his way through the positions of Peyton Westcott and Matilda Parts. But they are enjoying further fights down the pit straight. There is Pioccopola leading this big group of cars from Bogunovic this time, and Pedersen down in 6th after his little excursion through the gravel trap off the opening chicane. Ella Hakkinen currently up to 12th, and behind Peyton Westcott. Peyton Westcott holding the Mercedes colors in the F1 Academy, so driving the same liveried car like last year's champion Dorian Pan in the F1 Academy. Here in the Central European Formula 4, she drives for Karhan Motorsport team from Italy. Bogunovic, that is the predominantly black car, now under pressure from Dean Pedersen, who's definitely planning to do something about him losing places on the previous laps. You could also see the red and yellow flag being shown to the drivers. Oh, and there's a big mistake from one of the Jenzer cars, and that would be... That's not the Jenzer car, actually. Was that Simon Rechenmacher? Yes, I believe so, because Rechenmacher had already made his move and moved himself up to 2nd, which he now loses as he runs out of track, exiting the first chicane and dropping down behind the pole sitter Elia Weiss yet again. Max Karhan further up the road in the race lead. And exactly those off-track excursions bring out dirt and gravel on the track. That is exactly the reason for the red and yellow striped flag that you saw in the first chicane. Fearsome turn number 11, still flat. We were the first race of the day in the Renault Twingo earlier on, and when we went out of pits for the reconnaissance lap, quite a lot of parts of the track were still damp or even wet. Mostly the parts hidden in the shades of the trees that are everywhere around, as the Salzburgring track is located in the Alp Valley. So the sun really needs to find its ways to shine on all the parts of the track and dry it up after last night's rain. Ooh, one of the drivers will have an off-track excursion. That is the car number 99, Antonio Errigo, having to go straight ahead in the chicane. There's Ella Hakkinen in the mix as well. She still drives in 12th. Now under pressure from Alexander Luza. We have got one of the drivers in the pits, and that would be Bennett Gaspar from Zengo Motorsport entering the pit lane. Back to fights further up the field. And Matilda Pats actually joins this group because it would be Pio Coppola in fourth from Bogunovic. I think Pedersen is somewhere further down the field. He dropped a couple more places, so that would be Matilda Pats even up to, what would that be, sixth, I believe. Let's refresh the order. No, it's actually eighth for Matilda Pats. There is Pio Coppola. So that would be Jorge Luis Bruno in sixth. Then Bogunovic in seventh and Matilda Pats behind him. Andreas Lebu in ninth and Peyton Westcott completing the top 10 for the moment. Ella Hakkinen fighting with Errigo. And there's also Peyton Westcott in the mix. Further up the field we go with Matilda Pats. Car number 18, the orange and blue car of Matilda Racing. There is Pio Coppola defending from Dean Pedersen, Jorge Luis Bruno. Then in sixth, and Matilda Pats robbing Aleksandar Bogunovic of seventh place for the moment. Peyton Westcott up to ninth. She dealt with Andreas Lebu herself, and then Errigo and Ella Hakkinen in 11th and 12th. Right now, Max Karhan, just a few moments back, he was enjoying a lead of more than 1 second, but that is no longer the case, as there are just 7/10 of a second. Of course, no DRS, no overtake mode trickery in the F4 world. Simply men and machines, or drivers and machines, and women and machines, of course, having to help themselves. Just having to use the old-fashioned slipstream and no other toys to help them go about their racing. Andreas Lebu defending now from Errigo, if I'm not mistaken. So 7 minutes left on the clock, and there are your race leaders. Still not decided, because Elia Weiss has been putting in great sector times. On the previous lap, he did 1:21.4 compared to Karhan's 1:21.7, 0.3 of a second difference between them. And that just brings Elia Weiss closer and closer. Of course, the slipstream doing part of that work. And Elia Weiss now close together with Karhan. He will try to make another move round the outside, switches back to the inside. That was a surprise move from Elia Weiss. Big fight between the two Jenzer cars. Max Karhan still trying to stay neck and neck, and they are now going to the S's. Careful for the curbs. They are still staying side by side, and this time Max Karhan has already been pushed wide. Elia Weiss retakes the lead with 6 minutes left on the clock. That was a very brave, very aggressive move. But at the end of the day, I did not see anything unsportsmanlike. We're going to have to wait and see if there was any sort of contact through the S's, but I believe that Elia Weiss was simply just very assertive. And just did what he did, what he had to do in order to get things done. I mean, wow, what a sentence. Either way, Elia Weiss ending up in the race lead and now enjoying quite a lot of a gap, because as he pushed Karhan wide through the S's, It just put him out of position and made Max have a pretty terrible exit onto the final straight. And that just brings the erstwhile race leader, Max Karhan, to the hands of Simon Rechenmacher. Just as Elia Weiss enjoys 1.3 seconds of a lead with just under 5 minutes left on the clock. That could be a decisive gap for him and decisive situation through that aggressive move. But let's see how that pans out in the closing laps of the race. So far it's been all very clean, which is great to see. Also no safety car. So hats off to all the drivers for how they went about their race on a Sunday morning. And if you... Well, let's take a look at the second and third placed guys, because what they can now do is either fight each other out for second or actually collaborate and help each other to get back in touch with Elia Weiss. Honestly, to be alone on this track, I have my fresh personal experience is really no good, because you just can't be fast enough up the back straight. And that's one of the cars in the gravel car, number 76, and that is Jorge Luis Bruno. Not the first time for him this weekend, and that is a terrible, terrible bad luck for him, as that really reduces his chances to actually even get to the final race of the weekend. He raced already yesterday, and if I'm not mistaken, he was the one actually exiting the race in the gravel trap on the opening lap. So terrible, terrible, terrible luck for the Argentinian driver, who was visually frustrated. Watch out for each other. This is an easy mistake to do as you are trying to take the helix corner. Somebody coming from the insides. Ooh, and that was not good. It was actually a crash with, was it the teammate? The DriveX car of Jorge Luis Bruno, but I believe that he was collected, or he collected Francesco Piocopola. That's Techno Race Competition team, so not teammates. And would you just look at this frustration? And I absolutely understand it, because Jorge Luis Bruno among the fastest this weekend, but both races ending in gravel for him, and this time even with significant damage to the right rear corner of his car. And you could just see the message that he was sending to his opponent, Francesco Piocopola, as the Italian driver drove past to the scene of the accident on the following lap. This is not Martin Todt. I believe that Martin would love to be in the Formula 4 race eventually, as he's doing a great job in the Renault Twingo world, being definitely always one of the absolute fastest in the field, and trying to make a case for himself to get any potential experience and any potential opportunities testing and potentially even driving the Formula 4 car later on this year and potentially next season. Safety car is out, of course, for the car of Jorge Luis Bruno, for whom this weekend is over. And let's get the results of yesterday's race very quickly. Elia Weiss scored victory in that one, and it was, Jorge Luis Bruno, the only casualty of the race. as he was pushed out in the gravel and beached his car on the opening lap. And that means 0 points for the Argentinian, and that means no attendance in the weekend finale later on. So, yeah, a weekend to forget. Definitely positives to be taken away from it. But look at the timing screen. We are now going down to 0. The safety car will have to stay out, but this is it for race number 2 of the weekend. Or this will be it at the end of this lap, I beg your pardon. One more lap to go. And actually the graphics was slightly incorrect because I'm checking the live timing screen and we still have the last minute running. So a slight glitch in the timing as well, but either way, it changes nothing because that lap will still be done under the safety car, so no overtaking. And even though that for the finish shots, we'll probably get rid of the safety car and the race will be sort of virtually restarted, there will still be no overtaking all the way up to the finish line, which means that changes in the order are not possible anymore. So Elia Weiss cementing his position, and he will win everything that he will have been able to in order for him to qualify himself for the weekend finale later on today. Elia Weiss making a couple of very brave moves. First time overtaking his teammate Max Karhan around the outside of this fearsome corner, and then having lost the lead again, doing it for the second time, but that time not the longer way around, but actually making a very quick switch back down the inside, making a little surprising move on Max Karhan, and then sort of fist fighting him through the S's to box his way through. So this would be it. Safety car moves away back to the pits, but no overtaking is still allowed all the way until the finish line. So everybody just drives across it. And it is Elia Weiss making it 2 out of 2 this weekend so far for the qualifying races. Elia Weiss takes a victory from Max Karhan. So in the end, we have got the finishing order in the first 2 places, just as we had it on the grid. Simon Rechenmacher completing the top 3 and the podium. Dean Pedersen in 4th from Francesco Pio Coppola. Let's see if there is any investigation later on. Matilda Parts moving herself all the way up to 6th, so hats off to Matilda. I need to say that she's been increasingly impressive with her gaining experience, and I remember seeing her in the F1 Academy race weekend last year in Canada, where she actually had a couple of crashes. That was not the best of weekends for her, but since then, honestly, every time I come across her and seeing her in the results, it's just better and better and better. She was on the podium in Canada last weekend, and now she moves herself up to 6th in today's race. Very good for the young German. Alexander Bogunovic, he tried. He was very good on the opening lap and at the start of the race, moving all the way up to 3rd, but then dropping gradually down to 7th in the race's finish. Andreas Lebu in 8th from Peyton Westcott. So we've got 2 girls in the top 10. Great also the women in the championship. Antonio Arrigo completing the top 10. Ella Hakkinen dropped down to 16th at the start, moved herself back up to 11th. So not at all a bad race for her either. Alexandra Luza in 12th from Mia Ollert. Michalina Sabai joining the field for this race as well, having to watch yesterday's race from the grandstand. But this time her group comes into play today in both races on the program. Sebastian Frigolet, Igor Polák, Viktor Snöbjörn Poulsen, Ginevra Panzeri, Agustin Sepulveda, Bien Cesari, Nikolaj Dirvet, Leo Nilsson, Bennett Gaspar, František Němec and Patrik Lipovic completing the order, with Jorge Luis Bruno unfortunately again being the one driver not staking the checkered flag. So that's it for the first Formula 4 race of the day. Of course, that already being the race number 2. Coming up next is the Swift Cup Europe race at 9:45, so we'll be in around that time, so make sure that you do not miss that. Of course, we have a full day of racing, 2 races behind us, 8 still to come, so we are in for a great Sunday of motorsport. Stay together with us.